Hey folks, Philly Boy J is back with another video, and today I'm going to be doing a pork chop recipe. And I think this is my best pork chop recipe, and it's my favorite way to make pork chops. I previously done 2 videos in the past showing you guys how to make pork chops, but in 2 different ways. In one video, I basically fried them with a little butter and onions, and I made a light gravy. And in the other video, I fried them with flour, and I added a nice thick creamy gravy. Okay, but today we're going to be baking them. Here are the seasonings that you're going to need. You're going to need seasoning, salt, garlic powder. I like to use parsley flakes, onion powder, thyme leaves, and black pepper. So make sure you have all of those seasonings. Okay, we're going to need all of them. And here are the other ingredients that you're going to need. I'm going to be using some chicken broth and some, you can use flour or cornstarch. Okay, that's going to be our thickening agent. Some apple cider vinegar. I love vinegar in my pork chops, give it extra taste and flavor. And I'm going to be using some butter and some minced garlic. So here we have a pretty big onion. Okay, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be marinating our pork chops overnight. All right, so here are my clean pork chops, and these are on the thick side. These are thick cut pork chops, and I'm going to be marinating them overnight just so that they're well seasoned. So those are our pork chops there, looking nice and clean, fresh. I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. Please try to go out and get apple cider vinegar. Do not use white vinegar. You don't have to use vinegar at all, but if you want to follow my recipe to a T, I recommend that you use it. We're going to be using a tablespoon to about a tablespoon and a half of minced garlic. There's nothing like minced garlic on pork chops. We're going to be seasoning our pork chops with some seasoning salt. If you don't have seasoning salt, you can use adobo seasoning. That's probably the best thing next to seasoning salt to use. You can use salt, but I think the seasoning salt and the adobo gives it more flavor. Okay, going to be using a little onion powder, just a small amount, a little garlic powder because we already have some garlic from the minced garlic, but I like to add garlic powder too. We're going to be adding a very small amount of thyme leaves. Okay, so a very small amount of thyme. You can use fresh thyme if you want. I'll say about a half a teaspoon of thyme, and we're going to be using a small amount of black pepper. Okay, and I think this combination of seasonings and ingredients really result in a really good pork chop recipe. Okay, we're going to add some parsley flakes, and we're going to massage all of the seasonings and the vinegar in. Make sure you massage it well. And as I always say in my videos when I tell you guys to marinate meats, the longer the better. Okay, when I cook, I always cook 2 to 3 days ahead of time. So, you know, my friends come over sometime and they see me around the house just cooking randomly, and they're like, oh, that must be for Friday. Even though it's Monday, that's probably for Wednesday or Thursday. And I'm like, yeah. And I cook on Tuesday, and they're like, oh, that's probably for Friday. And I'm like, yeah. You can let it marinate overnight. Okay, that's good enough. But at least 8 hours. Anything less than 8 hours to me is not true marinating. Okay, so to a bowl, I'm going to add my chicken broth, and I'm going to add about 3 tablespoons of flour or cornstarch. Okay, and you can always add more if you feel like your gravy is not as thick as you want it to be towards the end. You can always add another teaspoon or so later on. Okay, but 3 tablespoons. Give that a nice stir. Make sure that it's dissolved. And now we're going to get ready to bake our pork chops the next day. For me, I think this was about 2 days later. Okay. You want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees. And look at me trying to fit these big behind pork chops into this baking pan. This baking pan is not big enough for these thick pork chops. So I'm placing my pork chops into my baking pan. And for this particular recipe, you are going to need aluminum foil. Because we want our pork chops to get extremely tender, and then we're going to let them brown. At this point, you want to slice up a medium-sized onion. That was a large onion that I had, so I just cut half of it. Okay, I wasn't using all that onion. So you want to chop up your onions, and they don't have to be extremely small. Okay, and you're going to add the onions to the pork chops. All right, just like that. That look pretty. Look at that. I gotta do a lamb chop video soon, guys. I like to put some onions under the pork chops as well, but this is kind of similar to the way I season my lamb chops. Not quite, but it's similar. You're going to add your slurry mixture. And what I'm going to also add is melted butter. So make sure you get some butter, melt it, and pour that over the pork chops. That, again, is for flavor and to help it brown once we take the aluminum foil off. So I'm pouring my slurry mixture into the baking pan, and that's just going to thicken up. If there are some lumps in it, do not worry. It's going to dissolve as it's baking. Okay, but yeah, that's my slurry right there, and that's some water that I'm adding right there. Okay, I let them go for about, I say, an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then I took the aluminum foil off and allowed them to continue baking uncovered, and the butter that we drizzled over the pork chops is what helped it brown. And this is the way it looks. Look at that. Look at that. Look at how tender the meat is. Can't you see it? Can't you see it? Falling off the bone. Very, very tender. We have our gravy there. Like I said, the gravy is not thick enough for you. You can add a little more cornstarch or flour. But you have to remember that gravy thickens up as it cools. So that's why I don't add too much of my thickening agent. All right. So we're going to get ready to plate these. And I love to eat this with rice. You can eat this with rice or egg noodles or mashed potatoes. I like them with all three. But rice is the best to me. I love it with rice or either some egg noodles, some buttery egg noodles. Talk about a good dinner, folks. Talk about a good dinner. Look at the pork chop. Look, oh! I make the best tender baked pork chops in the whole wide world. Whole wide world. Nobody make baked smothered pork chops like Philly Boy J repping Philly. Nobody. Don't nobody do it quite like that. Listen, all of these ingredients, you got the vinegar, guys. You got the seasoning salt. You have the garlic in the garlic powder. You have the onion, the flavor from the onions. Listen, the flavor from the onions and the minced garlic alone results in some really, really good pork chops. But then when you add the vinegar to it, it just adds that special element. And then the butter, and you got that gravy. I said I make the best. I pay you. I'll pay you. Pay you to find somebody. Pay you $1,000 to find somebody to do it like Philly Boy J. I said I pay you. I'll pay you. Don't nobody make pork chops like Philly Boy J. You listen, you find somebody that make them as tender and as beautiful like that, with all them beautiful and tasting and flavorful seasonings and ingredients that I add. I'll pay you. I'll pay you, God darn it, I'll pay you. Look at that, guys. Look at it. You know, I love food. I'm a cook. This is what I do. And I'm always trying to get better. Always trying to learn in culinary art school. Just always trying to be the best that I can be and strive for greatness. Listen, this pork chop recipe is delicious, guys. You are going to love it. I promise you, you're going to love it. It's absolutely delicious. Y'all remember that chicken and gravy recipe that I made? It's kind of similar recipe. You notice that? Kind of use some of the same ingredients. Same method. You're just making pork chops and you're adding vinegar. Hearty dish for the winter. Man, absolutely delicious. Philly Boy J.